All right, good evening. My name is Kurt Letkeman, and I'd like to welcome you here on behalf of the board, management, and staff of Access Credit Union to our annual general meeting. Before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge some of our guests from out of town tonight. I'd like to recognize Tim Cook from BDO Canada, Paul Prenovo from the Deposit Guarantee Corporation of Manitoba, and Mark Cussell from Vallejo. Thank you for making the trip out here. We'll be appointing a recording secretary for this meeting. I'd like to get a mover and a seconder to appoint Carrie Wilson as the recording secretary. If someone was willing to do that, could I please get someone to make the motion and second that? John Dick moves, seconded. Myrna Weeb. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We'll also be appointing a parliamentarian for the meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder to appoint Tom Frolinger from Pullman, Camerlac, and Frolinger as the parliamentarian? Mover Jim Newfold, seconder Art Dick. All in favor? Opposed? As carried. Also, can I get a mover and a seconder for the agenda that was circulated for the meeting here this evening? Can get that as well. Moved Ray Kirk, seconded Alvin Elias. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We have 109 people here, so that's a good attendance because I had said I didn't think we'd have more than 100, so glad we didn't put any money on that. Also, one more housekeeping item. In accordance with the bylaws, the notice of meeting was given using various media at a minimum of 14 days prior to this date. The bylaws state that quorum for members meeting is the number of members that is 5 more than the number of directors of Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union has 11 directors, so plus 5, the quorum will be 16 members. Our attendance at this meeting is 109, which would constitute a quorum. You'll have received a copy of the minutes for the annual general meeting that was held last year in Winkler. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the 2018 annual general meeting? Moved by Ruben Schultz, seconded. Scott Beatty, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. At this point, I'd like to introduce Larry Davey, the President and CEO of Access Credit Union, to present our financial report.
Thanks, Kurt, and welcome everyone tonight. I have the honor of talking to our financial statements today. We have enjoyed another strong year, just to let everybody know. I won't keep it too long. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask at any time. So looking at last year, we'll start with our balance sheet and our assets. The main categories in the first few is the funds on hand and our investments, and those two represent monies that we hold outside of what we take in on deposit and lend out. So any extra money fits into those areas. You can see over the last couple of years that they've increased slightly as far as our investments. Our funds on hand are around the same level most years. So in addition to that, on the asset side, we have our loans to members, and the loans to members last year grew about $155 million, which is pretty steady from the previous years as well. We have our fixed assets, our buildings and everything along that line, and all our computers and what have you. At the end of the day, our total assets this year ended at $2.635 billion, which was an increase of about $200 million year over year, and that's pretty steady from what it was the prior years as well. So we'll move on to the liabilities, and we'll look at the other side of the balance sheet. Our member deposits, in line with our member loans, grew in the vicinity of about $165 or so million. For the last couple of years, we've had a little bit of excess liquidity, excess deposits over loans. So we were careful to manage that the last year so that we were able to lend out a little bit more than what we took in on the deposit side. So our total liabilities are the 2.4 billion, I'm sorry. And then we get down to retained earnings, which is the equity in the credit union that the members hold. And right now, there's about $174 million in retained earnings. That continues to grow at a reasonable pace year over year. The regulations are we have to have 5%, and right now we're sitting at 6.61%, which is very strong in the system. If we look at the income side, we can see that overall the revenues are up about $14 million year over year. We'd love to take credit for that, but the majority of that has come as a result of the increase in interest rates the last year. So as Prime has changed through the Bank of Canada, if people have loans, their loans generally will rise with Prime if they're on a variable loan. And as a result, we saw our revenues increase. Conversely, the cost we paid on deposits also increased. As rates rose, we paid more on deposits, so that amount went up in the vicinity of about $11 million year over year. At the end of the day, our gross financial margin, which is the difference between what we take in on loans and what we pay on deposits, went up about $4 million. The brunt of that was a result of the money that we hold at Credit Union Central. So the extra money that we have that we don't lend out, we hold it at Credit Union Central, and it received higher interest because of the difference in the interest rates. So we were fortunate that way. When rates are dropping, that's probably the biggest area we get hit, is the money we have on deposit. So our revenues were up about $4 million year over year. When we look at our costs, our personnel costs, while dollar-wise they went up, as a percentage of our assets, they're now 0.71, and you could see a couple of years ago they were 0.76. So we continue to watch personnel costs ongoing to make sure we're in line with how much we're growing. The other costs are all pretty similar year over year. At the end of the day, our total cost, our total expenses went up by about $1.6 million, which was a little under 5%. But at the end of the day, we were also seeing our expense ratio at about 1.28% of assets, and that's dropped from 1.36% of assets a couple of years ago. So you know that we're keeping a close eye on expenses ongoing. Our other income was down a little bit this year. Part of that was a result that over this past year we had a number of people that had claims on their insurances for any insurance they had on their loans, and fortunately we were able to pay those out and help those people in their financial situation at a time that's very, very difficult. Gross operating income for the credit union, we made about $17.8 million, so a strong year, and it was about 68 basis points return for the credit union. That's up slightly over what we had the last couple years, which was 0.65. So it's pretty steady. It was a help to us that rates went up, but we're keeping overall strong control on the expenses. So if we look at getting towards the bottom line, we had our gross operating, and then we have to pay our taxes. Taxes were down slightly this year as compared to last year, although there's deferred income tax and all that in there. I don't want to get into that too much. We have an accountant here if you need anything. On the net income, our net income was $15 million, which was very strong. And I should go back to the taxes just for a sec, because over the last few years, we've seen a strong change in two areas, and that is in regulation, which represents a significant cost to us. The federal government and the provincial government, they put in a number of different things where we have to monitor and track a number of things through the credit union. And those are requiring more technology and a greater cost to monitor. The government isn't too worried about it. They're trying to keep track of money laundering and they're trying to keep track of terrorism. So we have a lot of things we have to now do that we didn't have to do 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So regulation's a big change. And then on the other side, technology is a huge change. Members are demanding a better and better experience with their technology. And in order for us to maintain them, we have to continue to invest in technology. The thing about it overall is we used to have 1 or 2 channels that you could do business with us. You could come to the branch, you could go to the ATM. Well, now you can come to the branch, you can go to the ATM, you can use telephone banking, you can use mobile banking, you can use internet banking. There's a number of things that we have to continue to support that are expensive. And then the other thing that changed this year in the budget, provincial government, they're just down the hall if you want to let them know, is they took away what used to be available to the credit unions, which was a tax credit program. So they're rolling it out over a 5-year period, but to our credit union, it makes a difference over the 5 years of about $9 or $10 million. And in the 5th year, it makes a difference of about $3.5 million. So those are funds that we would have seen in the past that are now going to go to the government. And obviously impact the decisions we have to make going forward. This just came out in the budget. It was a big surprise to everybody, but it is something we will continue to monitor. So when we get through all of that and we move on to what we've had in the past, Adam, just to give you a snapshot of how the credit union's done over the last, from end of 2014 to now, is we've seen the credit union grow about $700 million. So we're up about 37% in the last 4 years. Very strong growth. We're fortunate to be in a very strong area, and we continue to have more and more people joining the credit union and supporting us ongoing. When we look at the loans, it was very similar. Loans were up about $550 million over that 4-year period. Again, strong demand, and it means that we can pay strong rates on deposits in order to lend it out to people that are requiring it these days. So our deposits, again, fell in line. They were up about $600 million. With the change we had in our Platinum Savings, we've seen more and more funds flowing into the credit union. We've been able to do that because of the strong results that we've had. And then the final line, and you can see that 2015, 2016 had dropped off. That's where we saw a drop in interest rates. So the Bank of Canada shifted interest rates down, and again, it has a strong impact on ourselves, mainly on the money we have on deposit at Credit Union Central. And the final one we have is to make sure that we're operating our business efficiently. And in this one, the lower the number, the better it is. In 2014, we were at almost 64%. It climbed up a bit as our profit dropped. And then the last 2 years, we continue to move it in the correct direction. That's our financials in a brief snapshot. We have one more, and that's our equity. So this is the money that's the credit union has built up in its business. So right now we've grown that to about $175 million, which puts us as one of the strongest in the province. There's no doubt about it. Okay. So what questions can I answer? I know you've been sitting up at night wanting to ask questions on the fund. Is there any questions? We have our accountant here. He's ready to answer. Yes.
In your previous, what you showed there, what is the approximate percentage that is kind of required?
For the equity?
Yes.
Okay, the regulations are we have to have 5%. So taking our size credit union, that would be about $130 million, but we've got $174 million. Okay, so we have a strong buffer there to deal with any situations that were to come about. We're at 6.6% as compared to 5%. So we're about 30% higher right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry. Just before we get a motion on that, Larry had a couple of slides that showed the growth of the credit union, and I'm going to put a couple of people on the spot here. Reuben Schultz, what was the size of Access when it was started? Okay, Reuben's going to say 1.5 billion. Myrna Weeb, how many staff did we have when Access was formed? 195. Right now, we are at 2.6 billion, and our staff is about 230. So you can see the growth has happened exponentially and the success of coming together as the 4 legacy credit unions a few years ago. It's almost doubled in size, and the amount of staffing has just gone up maybe 20%. So it's been a success story. I was going to also mention, Larry talked about the profitability at $17 million or $15 million, and the amount that's required to retain as equity. Access grew by $200 million this past year, and just by regulation requirements alone, if you take 5% of that, $10 million of the profit has to go direct just to maintain that buffer. So sometimes when people say, well, you make all this money, but as you grow, you actually have to put more money away sort of into the savings account or a deposit guarantee just to protect yourself. So growth is great, but you have to have the profitability to go with that to maintain that you're keeping your buffer where it's required. So when you see that there's a $15 million profit, it's just all being kept. It has to be kept to keep the regulator happy. With that, can I get a motion to approve the 2018 financial report? Scott Beattie, seconder. Ray Kirk, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. All right, I'm going to give a report now on behalf of the Board of Directors. There's a written report in the book that was handed out later on page 28. There's also a President's report that Larry has put some good reading for later on at home, but for now I'll just give a verbal summarization of that. As Larry mentioned, 2018 was a good year for Access Credit Union. We performed better than the provincial credit union average on many financial fronts, and the results of the member survey showed Access serving its customers better than industry norms. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to thank the staff and management who continue their efforts to provide you, the members, with great service. While it was a good year for Access, and we've been on a nice run the last few years, I'm reminded of the quote, "Success can lead to complacency, and complacency is the greatest enemy of success." We're in an industry that is changing seemingly faster than most. As was mentioned today, over 90% of the transactions processed by our members occur either on a cell phone, a tablet, or home computer. To put that into context, say you owned a clothing store or a grocery store, and 90% of your in-store visits disappeared. How would you handle that? In the United States, the Bank of America has closed 15% of their branches in the past 5 years, and Wells Fargo is looking to close 1,000 branches by the year 2020. Technology is replacing branches, and this technology is expensive. Global spending on the financial industry is nearing $500 billion a year. And even in Canada, RBC alone is spending over $3 billion annually on technology features. At the same time, government regulation costs are increasing, and tax breaks previously provided to credit unions are disappearing. As you can see, complacency is not an option, and neither is doing business the way we've always done it. If people say bigger is not necessarily better, I say bigger will be necessary to survive. Consolidation within the credit union industry will continue, and all credit unions realize that the future will look different. From providing services differently than the traditional branch model to growth and security through amalgamations, we know the future is here, and the future is now. While this may sound scary, I want to assure you that your board and management are constantly working to ensure we provide you, the members, with the products, service, and security required to be successful. Access was again recognized as a top employer in Manitoba, and the Innovation Center we recently opened has drawn rave reviews from suppliers, others within the industry, and we continue to provide some of the best savings and loan rates in the country. We have plenty to be thankful for, not only at Access, but within the communities and region we serve. We are excited to step into a future that will look different than today. However, it is a future we feel we can be successful in. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to thank our staff for their continued great efforts at serving our customers. And I want to thank you, the members, for making Access a credit union that you can be truly proud of. This concludes the board and financial report section of the meeting. At this point, can I have a motion to approve the report from the board and to ratify the actions of the board for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018? Jim Neufel moves. Can I seconder? Ben Duick. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Through due diligence, the Audit Committee is recommending that we go with Myers Norris Penny as auditors of Access Credit Union for the 2019 fiscal year. Can I have a motion to appoint Myers Norris Penny as auditors for Access Credit Union for the 2019 fiscal year? Sherry Woods moves. Seconder, David Bickert. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. This time I'd like to call up Ray Kirk, Chair of the Nominating Committee, to review our nomination process and director election results.
Thank you, Kurt. The purpose of the nominating committee is to recruit qualified and suitable candidates for board positions. The results of a strong board are a strong, sustainable credit union. The nominating committee undertook several recruitment efforts, including advertising vacant positions in the media and working with local management. The results of the election of both West and Central regions is as follows. Phil Unruh was acclaimed in the West region. Elvin Elias was elected in the Central region. Please join me in congratulating both Phil and Elvin. With the conclusion of the election, I'd like to make a motion to destroy the electronic voting results. Do I have a seconder? Cheryl? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
This evening, we'd also like to recognize two long-serving directors who've been on the Access Board since its inception, and for whom today represents their last annual meeting as directors. This time I'd like to call up Ray Kirk, as well as his wife Linda, and Ben Duick and his wife Susan. Both Ray and Ben care deeply about the success of Access and representing the members they serve. Their contribution to discussions at the board table has been valued. Not only have they contributed to Access, they've both been active contributors to their communities, making them better places to live. I want to thank them not only for their contributions to the board, but for being the people they are. People who encourage, people who volunteer, and people who care and will continue to care about your credit union. On behalf of the board of directors, the staff, and members, I want to thank them for their many years of service. Could they please come up? As you can see, we called up spouses Linda and Susan as well. They spent a lot of time following along to various meetings and conferences. and being accepting when meetings required early mornings or late evenings. So we want to acknowledge them, as well as all the spouses who support us as directors of the credit union. At this time, I'd like to introduce your new board of directors. I'll call all the names and we'll get them to stand, and you can see who they are. We've got Scott Beattie, David Bickert, Cheryl Dewick, Alvin Elias, Jake Jansen, Kurt Letkeman, Jim Neufeld, Carla Unger, Phil Unruh, and Sherry Woods. These are your board of directors. We'd now like to move to the final part of our agenda. The board is proposing a bylaw change, or a couple of changes, that are going to hopefully streamline things a little bit. When Access was formed 10 years ago, the bylaws were put in place that required a certain amount of directors from a certain amount of districts, and they were hard written into the bylaws. We are looking to change that so that the number of directors will basically state the same thing as the Credit Union Act, which is anywhere from 5 to 17. So we're taking out the rigidity that has been in our Access bylaws, where it states you have to have 3 from one region, 3 from another, 3 from another, and 2 from the other. So this will just provide some flexibility. The new bylaw will state that there has to be equal representation on the board from each of the 3 regions, and the number of directors can be anywhere from 5 to 17. So that's the one change. The next change is also going to be the elimination of term limits. The feeling was that we should allow the membership to determine who the directors they want to have, and we should not restrict that as to how long a person has been a director. Leave it up to the membership to be a truly democratic process in that they can elect who they feel they want their directors to be. And the last change is also just putting in a clause, which many credit unions are doing, that just allows for the removal of an ineffective director if anything were to come of that. So there's 3 changes that we're proposing, and at this point I'm going to call up Tom Frolinger to propose the official part of the meeting, this thing. But before we do that, I'd like to also note that we have scrutineers for this bylaw change. Both Nathan Elias and Bill Penner have volunteered to be scrutineers if that time comes. Can I just get a motion to accept those 2 as scrutineers if required? Yeah, mover, Scott Beattie, and a seconder, Jacob Jansen. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We will be presenting the motion and then do that by show of hands if that is deemed appropriate. So, Tom, can I get you to please come up and present the formal changes?
The bylaw the resolution that's being put forward is quite lengthy. I don't propose to read it verbatim, or you'll all be asleep by the time I'm done. The whereas is at the front, essentially the first page, basically just spell out the legal basis on which this bylaw is being put forward, and it emanates from the Governance Committee recommending to the Board of Directors that certain steps be taken to streamline. The Act itself allows the members to make those bylaw changes, provided that the notice of the bylaw and the language of the bylaw is provided to each member with the notice of meeting. I've been informed that that has taken place, so the preamble to the bylaw has been achieved. The recommendation by the Board of Directors is that the members adopt the bylaw as proposed, and the particulars, as Kurt has indicated, are to make those 3 major changes. Housekeeping, number A is that the table of particulars, clause 602B, be deleted and a new section added, and it's written that clause 602 of the preamble says that qualifications in addition to those set out in the Act to be a director are, and then B is that a director may not be an immediate relative of a current officer, employee, or director of the credit union. And immediate relative for the purpose of this section is defined as a spouse, father, mother, sister, brother, daughter, son, grandfather, grandmother, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, mother-in-law, or father-in-law. The only real change from the original bylaw here is that we replaced husband and wife with the word spouse, and we defined the close relative or immediate relative just for the purpose of this section rather than all of the bylaws. The eligibility for re-election of directors is set out in Table of Particulars 6.04C. We deleted the whole of the 6.4C, which restricted the re-election of directors after 4 terms by having a cooling off period of 1 term. Instead, now 604C reads, there shall not be any limitations on the eligibility of director for re-election following the expiry of that director's term. So, as Kurt says, you're free to vote for whomever you wish, irrespective of any prior service. Schedule C of the bylaws, Table of Particulars, Section 101 was deleted in its entirety, and basically the new change removes the requirement of an east, west, and central division, and can now have as many divisions as you like, but at least a minimum of 3. And it provides that representation be equal for the purpose of electing district directors, and those members of the credit union who are assigned to a district are entitled to cast ballots for election of district directors. Each district will be represented by directors whose term, to the extent possible, will be staggered. The next change is the change to Schedule C to the bylaws, Table of Particulars, Section 103. Completely with its heading is being deleted, and this is the deletion of the Director at Large qualification, which means by having deleted it from the bylaws, the current Directors at Large will serve out their terms, and thereafter there will be no further or future Directors at Large. Finally, number E, Section 602 of the bylaw is amended by adding a new Section 602.1, which describes the duties of the directors once elected. And again, as Kurt said, this is being introduced by many credit unions and many other organizations in order for the board to be able to control the non-contributing directors, simply those who stand for directorship because they like the title. So this reads that once duly elected, in addition to the duties of directors set out in the Act, a director shall fully comply with all of the credit union's policies as adopted by the board of directors from time to time, including, without limiting, those pertaining to training, confidentiality, and conflict of interest. Failure to comply with such policies without a valid, as determined by the board, in a simple majority, may result in removal of that director as long as 75% of the remaining board of directors so choose. So this gives the active directors a little better control. And with those comments, Kurt, I'll turn it back to you to ask for the resolution.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions of Tom or myself on the proposed bylaw changes? Yeah, we've actually really debated that as a board. We've gone through a number of outside organizations. We've gone to consultants who work on this, and the industry is pretty much split 50-50 on it. 50% have term limits, 50% don't. We've gone through some people at the University of Toronto School of Business, and they do research all over North America, and they say it's kind of up in the air as to whether they see the value in it or not. So yes, we did spend a lot of time debating that. In the United States, it's done a lot differently. That's where a lot of this research is done. Their directors are not paid, and directors are truly volunteers, and they'll have a difficult time finding directors, and they probably have directors that sometimes work 30 to 40 years they serve on the board. So, we want to give our members the flexibility to sort of choose who they want to be the directors. Any other questions?
This is just referring to the bylaw change.
Correct. Yeah. We'll open up the floor later to any other questions people have. If there are no other questions, we will now have a vote by show of hands on the proposed resolutions, and I'd like to ask Nathan and Bill to be our scrutineers. Those in favor of the motion to allow for the bylaw changes, please raise your hand. Oh, sorry, I need the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we'll have a motion by Cheryl Duick, a seconder, Sherry Woods. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now I have the motion. Thank you, Myrna. All right, all those in favor of the proposed bylaw changes, please raise your hands. Keep them up as Bill and Nathan will be counting. They're not frontline people, so they're not used to counting quarters. It might take them a little bit longer. Comfortable? Okay, all opposed? Guys should be able to count that. All right, those motions have passed. All right, so by a quorum of members attending, the bylaw changes pass with a majority supporting the amendment. I want to thank everyone for their participation in this motion process. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions anyone might have of either the board or senior management. Any questions that anyone has they'd like to address during the meeting? Does the board foresee? I would say there's been research done within the province that suggests a future of a low or a high end 6 credit unions in the province and a low end of 1 credit union in the province. So, and there's presently 24, Larry pointed out. It was 7 or 8 fewer than there were 2 years ago. So I think, as I noted in my presentation, status quo is not really an option for long-term survival. So what the future looks like, we're not presently engaged in concrete talks. That said, everybody within the credit union system is constantly talking to each other about what the future might look like. So I would say we're fairly certain that 5 years from now, access will look different than it does today. Any other questions? And I want to preface when I say that, 10 years ago, people in Winkler, Carman, Morden, and Altona were having these same questions about what's going to happen to my credit union if we vote yes to forming access. And there was a lot of angst about giving up control, giving up local authority on things. And as the financial results have pointed, this has turned out very well for the legacy credit unions and for the communities that they serve. We've been able to almost double in size. We were able to provide some great rates. We're able to provide fantastic technology. All this would not have been possible for any one of those credit unions had they stood alone to try and tackle some of these things. And the community support that we're able to continually do. So it's a success story. We want to assure everyone that we are thinking and looking at the future seriously, but rationally, and we want to also assure our staff that there's nothing to be concerned about. We've gone through this a few times. It seems to always work out in the end, so whatever the future may look like, we don't know at this point. but we're confident that together with board, staff, management, we can be a successful organization. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you. I know it is the electronic voting. This is our second year of having gone through this process, and when you say every vote counts, it's definitely, that was a prime example of it, and I've been able to use that story to people to show that showing up to vote matters, because it did come down to one vote. On the technology front, yeah, we are looking at how to streamline that process. We have to also have some security on it, so you have to have, in this case, your membership number, which sometimes is different than your account number, and your birth date. It is something that the year one, when we did it, we noticed a couple of things that we could change. We made some of those changes for this year. We're aware of a couple of things that we could probably tweak for year three. So yeah, it is something we're constantly working on. And I think what I would encourage people is, if they do have these questions or concerns, point them out to the local branch people so that we can address them, because sometimes you don't know a problem until it comes up and you're surprised that it was there. Right, as Cheryl pointed out, the going to the electronic voting has increased the amount of people that are able to vote. So it's a step in a good direction. We realize it's not the perfect solution just yet, but we continue to try and enhance it and make it better. We've got Marlon here, our technology guy, so he's listening. Any other questions? You know, I also want to say that the board, staff will be around after the meeting. If you have any questions you feel you want to ask, by all means stop and talk to some of us after that. This concludes the business portion of the meeting. At this time, I'd like to invite Lionel Eubank, the area branch manager for the Altona, Gretna, Emerson, and Dominion City area, to choose the winners of the door prizes.
First winning number is 074-749-23.
Hey, got somebody over there?
Yeah. Over on the side here, Glenda.
They're gonna
Okay.
wheeling them around.
Yeah. Yeah, they're fairly heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first two prizes are baskets, so you can pick them up after if you want, because they are fairly heavy. Third, we'll be drawing for a $100 co-op gift card that Vallejo has presented with us today.
Second? This is the second?
Yeah, this is the second one, so this will be another basket, and then third will be for the grand prize, which is an iPad mini. So the second gift basket goes to 074-748-45.
Hey, somebody back there? Okay. So is this one?
This is for the Vallejo.
Co-op?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the co-op gift card. Okay. And the co-op gift card goes to 074-747-54. Okay, at the back there.
And then the iPad?
iPad, yeah. I'll keep them here in order in case they question it.
Okay.
Okay, and the grand prize goes to 074-748-43. Yeah.
Somebody back there.
Yeah, someone's obviously excited about that one, so.
All right, thanks, Lionel.
Yeah, I'll take these in order just in case we need to confirm them.
All right, thank you, Lionel and Larry. All right, I'd like to thank the staff of Access Credit Union who volunteered to help out this evening. I want to thank you, the members, for continuing to support your credit union. And I wish you all a good, safe evening, and now the opportunity to enjoy some refreshments and to mingle and ask any questions. Thank you.